If you're working so much on the farm, why is your weight high?
Well, this video is definitely getting uncomfortable again. So lately our farm has been getting a lot of questions. Uncomfortable questions. And I'm gonna try to do my best to answer those questions in today's video. I made a video like this a couple months back. Everybody liked it, so I decided to make another one. I put out a call on social media, and I think I got more than 500 questions, and so obviously I can't answer all of them today. But as you can see here, as well as the list of questions that are flying by on the side of the screen here, I do have a lot of questions to answer today. I'm gonna do my best to address them for you guys. And I will admit, I'm a little bit nervous that you're not gonna like me after you see this video.
Last time, people got really freaked out when I used these weird Snapchat filters as a way to ask the questions.
I don't want to do something scary, so I should do something different.
What could I do to take people on a journey even deeper into the uncanny valley?
Sondheim, send in the clowns.
I know. I'll use artificial intelligence.
Artificial intelligence.
That's a little unsettling.
So you're going for artificial intelligence and you don't want to tell the team.
Artificial intelligence is an unnatural abomination and a threat to humanity.
Send in the first applicant, please.
Do you ever, even for a second, regret buying the farm and moving away from the city?
No, not for 1 second do I ever regret leaving our life in the city, moving up here to northern Vermont, starting this farm, doing the whole shebang. No, I don't regret it at all. There might be certain small things, like little details that I would do differently, or approaching certain things like I do differently. Like, for example, I probably would have waited a little bit longer to do our home renovation until we were living up here and we'd actually lived in the space a little bit more. But other than that, no, there is nothing I would change whatsoever. Hey, Jenny.
How did you manage to save that much money before transitioning to be a farmer?
So the way I was able to save so much money is it's a couple-fold. I think number one, I actually worked a really good, high-paying job and it paid me really well. And so obviously the more money you make, the easier it is to save money. I think number two, both Allison and I live relatively frugally and relatively simply. And even when we lived in Washington, D.C., that was very much the case. And even though things like housing costs were more expensive, we didn't live extravagant lifestyles. And so that also made it very easy.
Any big plans for the big red barn?
So as far as our barn goes, the big red barn that you see right here, I honestly don't know what the long-term plans are for this structure. I mean, I really genuinely want to keep it up. I want to keep it going. I'm going to continue to use it in small ways for animals. Like right now, we keep all of our animal feed and we store a bunch of equipment down on that side. Obviously, the cattle are living in the barn in the winter on that side, but it's actually a 3-story structured place. And so I don't necessarily have any full plans to use the whole thing. We've done some small repairs on the barn and minor work on the barn in the name of keeping it preserved and keeping it together. I wanted to invest a lot of money into it because I don't necessarily see a good business case for it. And so that's why you haven't seen me do like a whole huge barn renovation.
Will you ever stick your own money into saving the old red barn, or will the only saving come from grants/taxpayers' money?
Well, the answer is I actually have sucked my own money into it. So when we tore down the structure that was hanging off here and repaired the barn over there, that was something that we paid for out of pocket. When we did the work to stabilize this portion of the barn, that was something that we paid for out of pocket. When we did the repairs over here and fixed all this up, that again was something that we paid for out of pocket. I think what the question answer might be basing their question on is the fact that back in 2019, we were actually awarded a grant to preserve the barn from the state of Vermont. Vermont has this cool program where they give out matching grants for folks who want to try to preserve historic barns. I think it has like a $15,000 limit for each grant, and you have to put up the matching funding. And so if I wanted to get $15,000, I would have had to put in $15,000. And even though we were awarded the grant money, we opted not to use any of the money for any of our barn repairs. I think the main reason behind that was because when we started making applications for the grants, we were struggling and just getting started. And I said, hey, look, free money, let me try to take advantage of it. I think the irony is things with like our YouTube channel grew so much and the income from our farm grew so much that, I don't know, I don't feel like I need it. And quite frankly, I don't really want the strings that come attached to it. And so I'd much rather privately finance the repairs and improvements of this than rely on like state taxpayer money. And to be 100% clear, we actually have never accepted a nickel of state taxpayer money to repair the barn, or I don't think even to do anything around this farm. Let me think, I'm just doing the quick inventory in my head. And yeah, there's nothing that we do in terms of subsidies or grants or anything like that.
Do you ever feel lonely considering you used to live in a city?
While I occasionally miss certain friends who live further away that I don't get to see as often as I would like, I really don't get lonely on the farm. I am a creature of habit. I am an introvert. I love having my daily routines and having most of my days look very similar. And then obviously I have my animals as friends to hang out with, and I quite honestly enjoy their company. And then I have good friends around here too. So no, I don't really get lonely here on the farm.
You are representing an unsustainable farming model to people that have a similar starting a farm dream. P.S. Love your transparency.
I'm not sure that that's really a question, but I personally don't think that my farm business model is unsustainable. I mean, heck, I'm able to sustain it. I do think I know where this question asker is coming from, in that not everybody can do what I did, and I think that's 100% true. But that's why I try to be very open and honest about the finances of the farm and, you know, how much we make actually from farming operations versus the fact that I really do support myself much more from social media income versus anything else.
Would your farm have survived without social media income?
Because of the way we started the farm, meaning I had the capital in hand to buy the farm and get going there, and then I worked a day job for several years really to finance living versus trying to live off the profits of the farm. Yes, I actually think our farm would have survived without social media. I can guarantee that it would have looked very different, but I also am pretty certain that I would still be farming here in 2023, even if social media had not taken off, and even if we hadn't grown the way we've grown. Hey dog, how's it going?
As a YouTube creator, do you ever struggle with writer's block?
No, I actually never feel like I get writer's block when it comes to coming up with ideas for videos or what I should do about a video or anything like that. I maintain a notebook that has hundreds of unexecuted upon video ideas, and every single day that I'm out here, I keep coming up with new ideas when I'm doing my chores.
Do you ever worry that people might get tired of watching you do the same thing in every video?
Oh, I am terrified that people are going to become bored of me and the farm and what we're doing here, and watching me do chores every day and sort of everything that happens in terms of the routines. Yeah, I'm always concerned about that. That's why you see me changing things up and experimenting with different video styles and different formats, and I never do kind of the same exact video day in and day out. But as I'm saying that, I think part of it is actually for you guys, because I don't want you guys to become bored of our videos, but I also know that part of that's for me. I think if I was somebody who just did the exact same chore video every single morning, I would become bored with this and would lose interest. And so the novelty of doing different video styles and approaching videos in different ways and telling different types of stories, that's a big part of what keeps me interested throughout all of this as well.
How did you get found so quickly on YouTube, and any advice for us smaller farm channels looking to get some action?
I'm not sure I got found all that quickly. I mean, I started making videos on the regular back in, let's see, it was like the spring of 2018. And in that first year, I think I barely got over 1,000 subscribers. You know, the latest milestone that we recently passed was about 750,000 subscribers. I'd love to try to hit 1 million this year, but number one, that took a lot of time and that took a lot of work, and so I don't feel like I got discovered easily. And then number two, I'll say this for anybody out there watching, a lot of those numbers actually don't mean much. Like, subscriber numbers don't actually impact how much money you get paid by YouTube. It's actually the number of views. And I'll also say that if you're chasing goals like that, you're gonna find it gets hollow really quickly. You know, I remember having 1,000 subscribers wishing for 10,000, or 10,000 wishing for 50, or 50 for 100, or 100 for 500. I mean, heck, even just now I just said I want to get to 1 million, but it's just me like wanting to get to the next thing. I think you've got to focus on telling stories that matter to you, and then those stories are going to actually matter to your audience. And so if anybody's out there wanting advice on YouTube, number one is figure out a way to tell a great story that you care about. And then number two, I would probably say, is focus on ways to draw people into that story and convey that story to somebody who's not familiar. Like, if you work on those two skills, you're gonna crush it on YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, wherever you're going.
Do you ever feel like your lack of experience makes you a bad farming influencer?
I don't think I'm a bad farming influencer. I mean, I think actually my lack of experience is part of why a lot of people watch these videos. I try really hard to be open and honest and say, hey, look, I'm new at doing this, I'm learning, this is something I've learned, but here's how I'm going, and not be arrogant to say that I know the best way to do something. That doesn't mean that I'm not occasionally gonna stop and say, hey, this is what I think is best for my farm and my context, but overall, I find myself being very willing and open to learn.
Was YouTube always a part of your plan when you decided to start a farm? Do you think your current or future status as a farmer would look any different if it weren't for the popularity of your channel?
So it was always part of my farm's business plan to have social media be a tool to market and sell our farm products. That was like always a big part of it from day one. And because I had skills like with making videos, I decided to start with YouTube as the first area of focus. But I absolutely never dreamed of like where this went or the way we make money now. Like I never thought that things would play out that way at all. I always thought it was going to be like a marketing engine, not a means of generating income in and of itself. But I think the single biggest thing I've learned about starting a farm and running our farm is that you might think that things are going to go one way, but they go another. And the most important thing is how you adapt and how you take advantage of that situation. And so if we weren't popular on YouTube or other social media platforms, I would have probably come up with a slightly different strategy. Like, for example, knowing what I know right now, like if we hadn't been successful with making videos, I would probably be making thousands upon thousands of trees, and this farm would mostly look like a tree nursery, because that's probably the easiest and most profitable farm business I now know how to run. So that's probably what things would look like, but instead I think we've been really lucky, and so things kind of look the way they do today. And just for the record, I'm kind of as shocked as you guys are that people like to watch our videos. Extremely grateful, but also very shocked.
How did you find your niche? Or what are you naturally good at? Also, how do you handle criticism? Ignore or respond?
I think as far as finding the niche, whether it was the farm or what we talk about in our videos or anything like that, it was just trial and error and figuring out what I like to do versus what I don't like to do, and trying to find a match between what I like to do and what people want. And when you can find the connection between those two things, it's a very, very beautiful thing. But you have to recognize that if you want to put yourself out there and get all the benefits that come from putting yourself out there, you've got to also be willing to deal with and accept and acknowledge that you're gonna get criticism, and you kind of have to just get a thick skin. I don't mean for that to come off as insensitive or callous. I just see that as a reality of how things are.
How much do you make from the social media at a year?
Very candidly, I don't put that number out there. I actually see it as a strategic disadvantage, particularly when I'm negotiating with brands and sponsors around what to charge them when I do like a sponsored video, that putting those numbers out there doesn't have any advantage for me, and so I don't choose to do it. I mean, if you look out there in the content creation world, I don't think I'm alone in that perspective. I think what's unique is I'm so transparent about like the farming operations business number side of things. People get a little resentful that I'm not as transparent around how much money we make from social media. But I will say we make a lot more from social media than we do from actual farming operations. And it's also an income that leaves me plenty comfortable to live the life that I lead today. And so yeah, I'm not gonna hide that, but I'm also not gonna go and give you the full breakdown of numbers. Sorry.
Have you ever been afraid of the channel getting too big? I.e., unwanted visitors for the celebrity status, the infamy scare with the hound hunters, stalkers in public places. All of those things to me sound terrifying. And we've seen those situations with other channels too often for comfort.
You know, sometimes it actually does worry me a little bit, especially given like how public our farm is. You know, if somebody worked at it, it's not too hard to find where we're at. I just really frankly also recognize that people are generally good and we haven't had too many significant issues. There have been a couple over the years, but that's a whole different story. But as the channel does grow though, I do wonder, will it become an increasing problem? I'm not too sure about that, and with any luck, you'll probably see that play out over time.
Sorta seems to me like you kinda enjoy spilling the tea sometimes. Is that true? And if so, why?
I genuinely can say that I don't enjoy spilling tea. I'm not a fan of rumors, I'm not a fan of gossip, but I'm also not the type of person who's gonna shy away from controversy. I'm not gonna be the person who's gonna say, oh, I'm just gonna mind my business because I don't ruffle feathers. If I believe what I am saying is right or what I'm doing is right, I am all too eager to ruffle feathers in the name of doing that thing that I think is right. As a result of the fact that I am not conflict avoidant though, that does create issues and that does create drama. Especially over the last few months, I've been really trying to reflect on this one and find the right balance between doing what I think is right and saying what I think is right, but also not trying to be a drama llama.
How are you getting along with other homesteaders in the homesteading community? Do you think they will invite you back to the Homesteaders Conference to speak again? Pet peeve that other homesteading channels are doing that you hate?
I mean, like anything, I think there's a whole range of different folks, and to speak about the homesteading community as like one concrete, immovable mass that views things one way or the other would be inaccurate. I think there's some folks who like me, I think there's some folks who despise me. I think that there are a whole heck of a lot of folks in the homesteading community who are wonderful people, and I consider them my friends and I love them with all my heart. And while I wouldn't say that there's anybody I hate, There's obviously a few folks over the years that I've clashed with who I am not fans of, and I don't like what they do, I don't like what they say, and I'm not gonna shy away from talking about that. I kind of feel like that's an important part of living my truth. And while I highly doubt I'm going to be invited back ever to Homesteaders of America, there are also going to be other conferences that I'll be showing up at this year, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
What are your most watched YouTube channels? Besides Alfred, of course.
Let's see, some of my favorite YouTube channels. I'm gonna give you 3 in a couple of different categories. So 3 that are in the farming and homesteading world that I absolutely love to watch.
Good day, folks. This is Greg Judy at Green Pastures Farm. It's looking pretty good. I mean, there's pretty good ground cover in here. We didn't take it down too short. And believe it or not, she's got a calf sucking on her. That's the first calf heifer. That post is probably 7 feet long. So there's 4 foot of it in the ground. Folks, this fiberglass rod here is a 5-footer.
I desperately need a milking stool. To think that a mistake that I made would have put him in danger, it's tough to swallow. Being a good neighbor is pretty much the most important thing in the world to me. Community is everything.
Hi, I'm Pete, and welcome to Just a Few Acres Farm. I gotta go down and check on the cattle. We could clean out you guys' pens, couldn't we? We could do that, bossy pig. You guys, you're just like a couple of bulls. There you go. Oh, you like that, huh?
But yeah, they're awesome folks and I love them. And then as far as YouTubers who are not in my space go,
there are countless highly efficient ways of getting around New York City. It's just, I'm alone, I work alone.
It feels very balmy today. Maybe I lack a certain level of social interaction.
Fluffy cat with the fiddle. These cats are so, and I'm kind of in a place right now where I'm like, if I saw a Starbucks, I'd go in.
I filled out job applications, turned up dressed as an employee, and I even went in a suit to an interview to finesse my way into that bottle right there, even though I have a history of being banned.
Do you work out or do anything to manage your weight? Are you trying to lose weight?
How come you're still so heavy-set after years of farming?
How do you deal with comments about your weight online?
Is there some way you can carve out time in your crazy day to lose weight? Not a ton, just enough so that we don't worry about you.
If you're working so much on the farm, why is your weight high?
Maybe I'm overthinking it, but over the course of watching your videos, it seems like you've gained weight.
This is a tough one. Well, this video is definitely getting uncomfortable again. I honestly don't really want to talk about this one, and I'm gonna just pass and decline to answer. Maybe someday I'll make a whole video on this topic, but just right now, I'm not quite ready to do that. So yeah, I don't know, sorry.
Why is your hair like that? No offense.
My hair? I mean, it's not much, but I don't know, it's hanging in there. You know, for a guy in his 40s, I feel like I'm doing okay hair-wise. I don't know. I mean, it's a little bit thin. There's a little bit deforestation, but it's not that bad. I do cut my hair myself, so maybe that's what this person's talking about, but I don't know. Is my hair that bad?
When you decided to become a farmer and live off the farm, how did the rest of your family react?
When I told my family that we bought this place, they were wildly supportive and super excited. When I told my family that we were leaving Washington, D.C., they were a little bit nervous, but they were extremely supportive. Over the years, they've helped me around the farm. They've come up to visit. We've had great memories. And quite honestly, I don't think I could have asked anything more for them. They were overall pretty supportive. My parents in general have always been pretty supportive of the things that I want to do, having confidence in me to be the one to know what's the right thing to do. And so, yeah, no, I don't feel like I've ever gotten any second guessing or, you know, backseat driving from any family members around moving to the farm or doing the farm or thinking I'm crazy for doing all of this. And yeah, as they've seen how things have played out, they couldn't be any happier for me.
Are your parents living or nearby?
So both of my parents are alive. My mom lives down in Connecticut, actually in the same house that I grew up in. A couple years back, my dad retired down to Delaware, and so that's where he is these days. Ooh. And Abby and Toby are playing around right now and almost knocked over the camera. I find that like once or twice a day, the dogs like to do this. They just come out and run around. They do it away from the birds or away from the cats. They just kind of like to go crazy. It's kind of fun to see, actually, when I get to witness it. And yeah, they both come up to visit every once in a while.
Do you have siblings?
So I have a sister. She lives actually down in Connecticut as well, pretty close to my mom. I also have a couple of step siblings, but because my parents got remarried when I was an adult, I never really got all that close with the step siblings. Mind you, they're all very nice people. But yeah, my sister is like my one true like sibling.
How did you meet your wife? Who made the first move?
So much like the way I've met most of you, Allison and I met through the internet. I mean, this was like before the days of Tinder, but we met on a different dating website. I don't really want to promote them or anything. And so I think I made the first move by sending her a message, but yeah, that's how we met. We were both in our 20s living in the general like Hartford, Connecticut area at the time.
Does Allison really enjoy being a farmer's wife and life on the farm?
So I know that Allison does not like actively enjoy the idea of being a farmer's wife. Like that's not what she ever dreamed of. But I do know she likes life on the farm. I know for some folks that might seem like a contradiction, but if you knew Allison, that would make sense.
Do you give your wife adequate attention despite being so busy with the animals?
Yeah, I try to. I mean, we really genuinely do try to make sure we have time for each other and like we're making just our marriage and our relationship a priority. I think that's really, really important. And particularly because I'm the type of person who can get so hyper wrapped up and focused on my projects and the latest new thing I'm working on. I actually do have to like make sure I intentionally put in that effort to really support her and support our marriage. And so, yeah, I work really hard at that one.
Does your wife complain to you that she can no longer travel freely because of your farm work, or that she cannot see her old friends often because you have moved to the far north?
So Allison absolutely does love to travel. What we found as like a good compromise is I don't always go on every trip that Allison goes on. So as long as I stay here, I can tend to the farm, and so that takes out that issue. And Allison might go traveling with her sister or some of her friends or go visit a friend. And so she doesn't need to necessarily have her husband in tow for every single trip she goes on.
Was Allison wearing a wrist brace when she was brushing your new bull Randy Macho Man? If yes, what happened? And is she doing better now?
So back in November, Allison actually injured her thumb skiing. And so she was wearing a cast for about a month. And then she was wearing a brace when you saw her in the visit to Randy Macho Man Savage. She still has like a protective thing that she wears a lot of times so she doesn't bang it and injure it or re-injure it. But she's on the mend, and it was actually just recently her birthday, and she got to go skiing for the first time since the injury on her birthday. And she was over the moon because like skiing is her absolute favorite part about living in Vermont and her favorite winter pastime.
Do you ever get to go away on vacation?
While we don't vacation a lot, later this year, both Allison and I are going to leave the country and go on a vacation. For privacy reasons, I'm not going to tell you where. For security reasons, I'm not going to tell you when, but I will tell you that will happen sometime in 2023. The last really big trip we went on was back in February of 2020, so like right before all the pandemic stuff exploded. We went on this awesome trip to Spain. I would expect us to do another big awesome trip, but stay tuned, it'll happen at some point this year.
Does your wife sometimes get uncomfortable posting your life/property all over the internet?
So whereas I'm a person who just is comfortable with being in the public eye and I can take that equation, Allison is less comfortable with it. And so part of why you don't see her in a lot of videos is she just doesn't want to be on camera and critiqued all the time. She doesn't want to have to be the center of attention. So she is much less comfortable than I am. What I try to do is strike the right balance of giving her that privacy she needs while I still talk about the farm and do stuff on the farm. You guys will notice there's a lot of stuff in terms of like tours of our house or showing you a lot of our day-to-day life or family life or things that we're doing with friends that you never see show up on this YouTube channel. And that's partially me trying to make sure I'm maintaining a good balance of privacy for Allison, because she doesn't want to put that stuff out there, and quite frankly, I don't blame her for that.
Did you ever get anxious about your smell?
I don't think I smell. I think I generally bathe regularly and don't stink. Toby dog, what do you think? Do you think I smell, man? Do I stink? Do I? No.
It stinks! This whole place stinks!
I'm sorry if this offends you, but I personally can recognize a farmer or people that work with animals. They have distinctive smell.
Well, thank you for clarifying that. And yes, when I go outside, for example, and leave the farm, I don't wear these boots, both for the fact that they might have poop on them from wandering around the farm, and I don't want to spread that around in the community. But then also for the biosecurity reason that I don't want to bring outside things here onto my farm and spread it to my animals. And so I'm actually very careful about where I wear footwear and what I wear on versus off farm.
It occurred to me while watching one of your videos that livestock farms were big, open sewage dumps. What impact does this have on your local environment and community?
I really like how you put that one, but I genuinely wouldn't call our farm an open sewer. So in the winter months, we do create a lot of manure that piles up, but what we're focused on doing is making sure we have ways to capture it. Well, Abby's even marking her territory right there. And so this bedding, I use a lot of straw to keep this area nice and clean. It makes the hoop coop not smell like ammonia or anything, but it just gives it a nice earthy smell because I just have bedding piled upon bedding piled upon bedding. That bedding will compost, and so that keeps it from spreading out into other places, like for example our waterways, and impacting the community. And then what I'm gonna do this spring is basically gather up all of this bedding that's been captured in the carbonaceous diaper of straw, and then I'll be spreading it on the pastures, and I'll be spreading it around our trees, and Allison will probably use it in the garden. And so the compost gets used after the fact, and so we're able to harness the fertility of our animals and use that to make our farm even better. So I would contest the idea that a farm is an open sewage dump. If the farm has good compost management strategies, it should not be that way.
How hard was the first harvest of animals?
Oh man, that first duck that I killed, which was the first animal I had ever slaughtered for meat, really one of the first animals I ever killed in general. That was a tough day. I mean, I did 13 ducks that day. That first one was really hard. It got easier as the day went on, but it wasn't easy at all. Over the years, it's gotten a lot easier, but it's still difficult.
How do you feel about people, vegans, animal rights activists in the comments, telling you don't love your animals because you eat them?
I mean, as the dude would say, that's just like their opinion, man. I learned a very long time ago that I can't let other people's opinions and other people's perspectives influence me too much or impact my sense of self-esteem or impact what I actually believe. And so number one, I absolutely do love my animals and try to give them the best possible life. And number two, I don't think there's a conflict with that concept in the fact that some of my animals get raised for meat.
Was it more emotionally difficult to harvest Kurt Cobain compared to the usual duck and geese cullings?
There is definitely a sliding scale where I find that it's easier to kill a chicken than it is to kill a duck, than it is to kill a goose, and than it is to kill a bovine. And so yes, Kurt was the hardest animal. Maybe not the hardest animal, one of the hardest animals that I've ever had to deal with for processing. And that's an example where he was like one of the few animals where I was completely uninvolved with his processing other than loading him into the trailer and going over to the abattoir for his slaughter date. I wonder if it's gonna be harder for me when I have to take Joey Ramone than it was with Kurt. But either way, it's gonna be something that inevitably happens, and it won't be fun, but it's gonna be necessary too.
What animal death hit you the hardest so far? Lil Barn Cat didn't pass away, so she doesn't count.
I don't know, that's a tough one. I feel like I've actually been insanely lucky when it comes to our animals on the farm where we haven't had a ton of deaths. It was really hard when my first batch of ducks got sick and I lost a handful of them. It was hard when the mink attacked the coop and killed a couple ducks. That was also difficult. Lil Barn Cat was probably the most emotionally trying situation for me, but even then she survived and she's now happily our indoor cat. I think probably the hardest animal death, the one that I took the hardest that made me the saddest, was Samson the duck. For those of you guys who don't know, Samson was this gigantic white Pekin duck who was on our farm. I actually got some eggs that I gave to a local nursery school and let them hatch the eggs out as a science project for their class, and then I took the ducklings that hatched out and raised them up here on the farm. Samson was the son of Jemima and Samuel Puddle Duck. Actually, Jemima Puddle Duck is still here on the farm. You can see her here. See her? She's the lone big white duck wandering through there. Right there. She's actually the oldest bird on our farm. And so her son, he grew so big and so large. Number one, like I made videos about him, and actually my first hit YouTube video ever was about Samson, and that video was like the first video I ever made that got like 1 million views or anything like that. Well, as Samson kept going and as he aged and as he grew, He became so heavy that he actually had trouble walking. And so I ultimately made the decision, because his quality of life was so poor, that it was time to butcher him, and we put him in the freezer for meat. That was the animal death that I took the hardest, and that was also the hardest butchering probably ever. That was probably even harder than Kurt Cobain, as I talk about it and think about it right now.
Do you keep some animals alive only for the camera?
Absolutely not. I do not in the least bit ever try to keep an animal alive just for the camera. Like, I know that there's been some controversies out there in social media about, you know, like disabled horses that people keep alive, or like birds that have like carts that help them move around, but they're not really living like birds, or people are saying that people are keeping those animals alive just for clicks and views. I 100% am opposed to that. And in fact, I think Samson's maybe the best example, where I could have kept feeding him and kept growing him and getting a bigger and bigger duck and like try to break a world record with the world's fattest duck, but his quality of life was awful and he was clearly suffering, and that's why I made the decision to put him down. And so no, I'm actually extremely against that, and believe that if an animal's time comes, it's the responsible thing to do as the farmer to put them down. But of course, as I'm talking about that right now and watching my dogs and barn cats, I will have to say that's a much easier thing to think about and say when it comes to my birds or even my cattle. I'm absolutely terrified to think about one day maybe having to put down one of my dogs or cats. That moment right there is gonna absolutely break my heart, and yeah, I don't even want to think about it, quite honestly.
How do you feel about the comments that prefer when your content is apolitical, even though your way of farming is very influenced by your political ideals?
This is such a great question, because I struggle with this one all the time in terms of how much to talk about versus how much not to. So much of the premise of this YouTube channel is documenting my experience of starting a farm. And a big part of that is driven by my beliefs, whether they're moral beliefs or political beliefs or something of a combination of the two. Yeah, I have strong opinions about stuff, and the idea that some people want to watch my content and enjoy what we're trying to build here on the farm, but get angry when I talk about something that drives the actions that I'm taking with the farm, I don't know, it confuses me. And I struggle a little bit too, and sometimes get frustrated, because it's like, I'm shocked that we as a society have become so soft that when we hear somebody's opinion or perspective that we don't agree with, that we get so angry that we want them to shut up. And so I would get if like I suddenly started to become a channel that all I did was talk about partisan politics and political debates, and the Dems are doing this and the GOP's doing that, like that became the focus of this YouTube channel. Like, I would totally get why people would not be interested in that and tune out. I am more frustrated when I might talk about a specific issue or an idea, and even talk about it in the context of what that does for how I try to manage this farm, and then they get so angry and upset when they hear that I'm a guy that disagrees with them. And so yes, I wish people wouldn't get so worked up anytime I touch on a theme that might be vaguely political or be a point of view that people disagree with. And I really do think about my own personal media consumption habits and some of the things that I watch or some of the things that I listen to. And there's a couple people who have like podcasts or YouTube channels that I will watch or consume their content on the regular, and I violently disagree with them. But I'm curious to hear their perspective and hear where they're coming from, and really try to understand why they think that way, because I feel like that only makes me better, smarter, more informed.
Why are you a capitalist? I understand it's the current organization, however, there are lots of people in permaculture or regenerative AG who would like to head towards a more local, communal system of obtaining goods and services based on the needs of the community.
You know, a couple weeks ago I made a video where I kind of made just sort of an off-the-cuff joke about socialism not working. And I have made comments in other videos talking about how I believe myself as a capitalist. And I want to clarify this one a little bit. So yes, I do believe that economies and societies that function on commerce as a core organizing principle are often much more successful because they encourage good cooperation and integration amongst various society participants. That doesn't mean that I believe that there should be no government regulation. That doesn't mean that I believe that it should be absolutely naked free market. But I do believe that that as a core organizing principle makes the most sense. But I'll also say that I see a difference between socialism as that organizing principle or construct versus, say, socialist programs. And there's actually a lot of socialist programs that I think make sense. For example, like Medicaid or Social Security. And in fact, I wish we as a society here in the United States did more of that with things like, say, healthcare or education. I think it would make this a better place. But when it comes to the idea of trying to set up some sort of commune structure for the farm in terms of how we do things here, I don't think that that makes sense, because there's oftentimes going to be this friction that happens between the amount of production somebody does versus the amount of compensation that somebody does. And if you have this collective communal view for how you try to operate something like a farm, I think it's very hard to make that work. I don't think it's impossible, I just think it's difficult. There's a difference between the two.
What's your favorite punk band?
So this is actually a nice pace-changing question after all this heavy talk and deep questions. I don't know, like, I like a lot of bands. Some of my favorites include the Dead Kennedys, the Damned, the Misfits, NoFX. I love the band 15. I love Jawbreaker. I love Screeching Weasel, Filth, Blatz, modern bands like Days and Days and Lawrence Arms. But if I had to like just pick one and say who's my absolute favorite punk rock band of all time is probably Crimpshrine. They're like a late 1980s Bay Area band who was kind of contemporaries of, say, like Operation Ivy, which is another band that I absolutely love and cherish. You know, the lead singer and guitarist was Jeff Ott, who went on to go form 15. The drummer was Aaron Comet Bus of the famous Comet Bus music zine. And it's just such good music that both feels good to listen to and like brings me back to a special place of when I was a teenager and where my mind was at.
When I was younger, I came but a fight. Now I look around to realize.
And so yeah, I love me some Crimpshrine.
How will you control when your cows get pregnant so they give birth at the desired time? Will Randy have to be kept separated most of the time?
Well, it's gonna be a little tricky to manage like the pregnancy times, and I'm pretty sure I'm gonna screw it up. Like, so for example, I have Belinda Carlisle and Bonnie McMurray right here. There are two young heifer calves. I'm gonna wanna wait a couple years before I breed them. And so there might be times where I separate them off, just the two of them off from the rest of the herd. And so I might have to keep them separate at times. There's also gonna be times when I need to separate out Randy Macho Man Savage. Pretty much from like November to like July 1st, I'm not gonna wanna have Randy in the same exact space that I have the other female cows, or else I'm gonna run the risk of having calves that are born too late in the dead of summer or calves that are born in the dead of winter. And so I'm still trying to work out how I would do that. Probably what would happen is I would separate Randy off with our steers. And so the steers and Randy would be in one area and the cows would be in another. All of this really leads to the point that when I think about like the farm pasture, you know, having two separate pastures is going to make so much sense, where I might have the cows in the upper pasture and the steers and bull in another pasture. But then certain times of year I'll combine them all together. And so that's part of what I'm trying to think through too when I think about the long-term cow plans.
Would you ever grow and harvest marijuana on your farm? Why or why not?
So I've actually never experimented with growing marijuana. I have grown like CBD hemp before and experimented with that a little bit. I don't really see myself ever getting too involved in that sort of thing though, because number one, I actually see it as a tough business case to make. Number two, there's a lot of rules and regulations that surround it that don't necessarily make it appealing to be in that business. And then number three, when I think about what I love most about farming, I've definitely come to the conclusion that working with the animals and taking care of the animals is my favorite part about farming. And so I really want to just focus my energy and attention there. So yes, I don't see myself becoming a pot farmer.
Is Tom Winklin a thing? Also, how's Toby McQuackers? Day 76 of asking for a pig named Tom Winklin.
So I don't know, man. Is Tom Winklin the thing? I don't know. What do people think about the name Tom Winklin? If you guys have seen the comments and what's happened over the last few months, you might be more aware of the situation than others. But I'm not sure about Tom Winklin, but yes, definitely the pigs are a thing. I expect to get 2 or 3 pigs in late April, May, somewhere in that time period. I don't exactly know what breed, I don't exactly know where I'm getting them, but my goal is to like raise up a couple of pigs, butcher them come late fall, so by the time I get into heavy winter, I'm done with it. And so that's gonna be something you see start to happen later this spring. And yes, Toby McQuackers is actually still around. She's in the hoop coop with the other ducks. Let me see if I can spot her for you. Oh look, Alfred's showing up in his tractor.
Yeah, we're kind of burning daylight here, eh?
Yeah, sorry, burning daylight here. I know, I got a lot more questions to get through here.
Seeing you keep growing the farm with even pigs on the way, Will you be getting a farm hand in the future?
So I don't know if I would ever get a farmhand full time, at least with the way the farm's set up right now. But I do think about like the long-term vision of what the farm's gonna look like, and if we shift enterprises, we might. But right now, I don't have a lot of like day-to-day work that I need help with. And in fact, I love doing the day-to-day work. Coming out here and like locking up the birds at night and taking care of stuff around the farm, generally speaking, that's like some of my favorite stuff to do. If I was gonna hire a farmhand, that'd probably be the stuff that they would do, and so I would miss doing that. And so I don't foresee that being a thing that I try to tackle anytime soon. What I'd much rather do is like what I did last year, where I took some money and set it aside to hire people to help me with things. You know, for example, like Alfred helping me with various projects around the farm, I'm able to pay him. And so the money that I would take to like pay like a regular farmhand, I'd rather give to people for project work. You're gonna see like Alfred again back here next summer doing a lot of stuff, and you'll probably see my friend Justin here a lot in the spring helping build the barn. That money would have come from what I would have spent on like a farmhand or something. And to me, it just makes more sense given the way our farm's set up.
There seems to be a lot of work that you do not include in your videos: brushing the dogs, replacing bird bedding, cleaning up the cow poop, restocking feed cans, building fences, planning out your calendar, planning new builds, machine/tractor maintenance, purchasing hay or other supplies, and I'm sure much more. I love your videos and appreciate the thought and planning that goes into them, but am curious as to why you talk about these activities, but limit visuals of routine tasks other than morning/evening chores.
So I think that that's entirely fair, accurate, and true. That there's a lot of like day-to-day things that you don't see me doing on the regular, and there's a couple reasons for that. I think, for example, number one, there's the fact that I've done it before, and I find that if I show the same thing over and over again, it's not that interesting for folks. And then as an add-on to that point, what I've also found is, and I'm able to tell this by looking at my YouTube analytics, most of you guys don't like watching that. Like I can tell when people are watching or when they tune out, and when I'm doing certain chores like say scooping up cow poop or cleaning out a birdhouse of some sort, people usually just tune right out. And then I think the other truth that comes into it is a lot of times some of those things are harder to do when I'm actually trying to videotape them as well. So for example, building projects or putting in fencing or that sort of thing, it's a lot harder to document it and capture it and do that thing. And so a lot of times I would much rather just come out here with my headphones on and an audiobook going and like do a build of something or work on something, and maybe I'll capture it in a time lapse and maybe I'll feature it like in a longer video. And I think a good example of that was like say the video where you saw us build the hoop coop. But generally speaking, I'm not gonna like really try to work that hard to come out here and make videos where it's just like me doing brutally boring farm chore after farm chore, because I don't think people want to watch it. And I know there's gonna be a couple folks out there who can say, no, I do want to watch it. That's exactly what I want to see. And while I love you for that perspective and I love you for saying that, I also know there's not enough of you who feel that way to make it something that works for the channel as a whole. And then maybe actually just one last reason for why you don't see a lot of that is just what I find as the ritual and routine of making videos that works best for me is to come out here and do it first thing in the morning while I'm doing my morning chores. I'm a morning person. I have my most energy. I'm most excited to talk to you guys first thing in the morning. And so that's why you usually see the videos happen during morning chores. And so you can see me filling a water bucket 1,000 times or releasing the quack in 1,000 times, but you might not see me doing other things on the regular. Let's see, I'm trying to spot Toby McQuackers here for you guys before I lock everybody up for the night. I actually think that might be Toby right there. Yeah, here, this guy. Not the black ones, but the brown one. I'm pretty sure that's Toby McQuackers. Come on, Toby McGuard dog. Let's go, buddy. Come on, pal. See, like even when I show you guys a scene like that, if I'm doing the filming while I'm doing it, I now have to come back in here and get the camera. So I don't know, maybe that explains it for you.
What's your 5-10 year plans for farm life?
So I've been thinking a lot about this question, and I think it's a really good one, but I don't know if I have a great answer for it just yet. Like given where our farm has gone over the last 5 years, I really do wonder where we're gonna go over the next 5. You know, seeing as I don't necessarily need to raise animals and sell farm animals and farm products for money, because we have the social media income stream, would I be better off if I just focused my attention on like turning this into a non nonprofit where I'm raising and growing food to feed hungry people instead. I also think about wild and crazy things like, what if I gave up on raising poultry and focused more on raising pigs, as well as starting a dairy where I did grass-fed milk and I produced butter, and then I took the whey waste from producing the butter and used that to feed the pigs. And do I do something crazy like that? I don't know. All of that said, I do know that I want to focus more and more on raising cattle. I want to focus more and more on regenerative agriculture and practices that are designed to help heal the planet. And I also know that I don't love having to do like retail customer support and order fulfillment. And so I'm thinking about that, trying to figure it out things long term. I'd be curious to hear from you guys, and I'll probably make other videos on this topic, but I don't know. My guess might be as good as your guess right now.
How has quitting your job affected your future financial plans?
So I was very careful to make sure that I had my finances in exceptionally good order before I quit my day job to focus on the farm full time. And so, you know, I've been growing a 401k since I was like, I don't know, 24, 25 years old. I've got a fair amount in retirement savings and other savings and investments. And so I feel like I went out there with like a good, stable structure. And so from a financial standpoint, I'm going to continue doing what I've been doing, and I don't see any significant reason to change that approach.
How are you preparing for possible economic hard times? Are you invested in good income vehicles? Do you have a lot saved up for it? Or are you just going to go with the flow?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of talk about economic hard times and struggles, but I also know I'm very privileged and lucky to be in a position where I'm financially stable. I have like zero debt. I have some good marketable skills as well as assets. And so I feel like we're kind of in a good situation to weather the storm and roll through it. I don't know, I hope for the best. I worry about a lot of other folks who might not be as well positioned as us. And honestly, when I think about economic hard times, that's what I think about more than like how we're gonna endure. I feel like Allison and I are in pretty good shape. Something just got the dog's attention. Did you see that? Toby just snapped into Cujo mode. And so did Abby. They're both out there. They're doing their thing. I love watching this. If I hadn't already committed myself to making this video today, I might have spent all night just watching what they're watching.
Will you be able to afford healthcare if your spouse stops working?
Yeah, so we could definitely afford health insurance if like Allison had stopped working and like we were just like living off of what we made through the farm and social media. You know, we'd probably buy health insurance on the public exchange or something. But yeah, I think we're in a position where we can at this point handle that. It's one of those things too, interestingly, like I watched Allison's health insurance get worse and worse. And when I was in corporate America, I'd watch my health insurance get worse and worse every year. And I actually think that private health insurance, or at least employer-based health insurance, is not nearly as good as people remember it being, say 10 or 20 years ago. And I do wonder, and even to a certain extent hope, that at some point we as a country actually nationalize our healthcare system, move to single payer, drive out a ton of the costs that come from things like drug manufacturers or a highly dysfunctional healthcare system or hospital system, and actually try to do things to improve things for folks in America. I would frankly applaud some sort of change like that for sure. Everybody needs healthcare, you guys, and it's stupid that we have to force ourselves to pay retail for it.
I don't have a particular question to you. Would be happy if you just mentioned that there is this guy that watches my video from the beautiful country of Nepal. Please, please, would mean a lot.
So yes, apparently there's a guy in Nepal who likes watching our videos. So how's it going, buddy?
I want to know your IQ and what you went to college to study. And I fully recognize that is grossly inappropriate.
I honestly don't know what my IQ is. I mean, I remember testing for it when I was a kid in school, but I don't quite know what it is. And I also think that IQ is like a measurement of intelligence. Is kind of a bunk thing to begin with. I went to art school, and so I studied art in college. Oh, and the dogs are at it again. And yeah, that's what I studied, but I guess thank you for the compliment. After a video like this, I could really use it.
If Toby had gotten Abby pregnant before she was able to get fixed, what would you do?
I mean, if that had happened, I probably would have just had the puppies and would have been giving away puppies. I don't think legally I could actually sell them, so I think I would have to give them away for free to good homes.
Do you feel any guilt training Abby with punishment methods? Whatever you think about shock collars, they are based on punishment. Did you consult any dog trainers that use positive methods before choosing shock collar?
I have zero guilt for Abby Dog's training methodology. I mean, my only guilt is maybe waiting too long to get help. Yes, I actually started with a lot of positive reinforcement training and having that be the focus and having it be solely positive. But what I was finding was that was not working. And so that's why I had to switch. That's why I got help from a trainer. That's why I went to the e-collar. And when it comes down to how I used it, I was really using it as a collar that would vibrate when she was doing something wrong. And it was a way to get her attention and redirect her to the thing I wanted her to do. And when it came to Abby Dog's training, I think that was very much a turning point. And it's gotten to a place where she's really working out here on this farm. When, I mean, if you think back to last summer, she was not working out. And I feel like there was probably a good chance Abby wouldn't still be here on the farm if I hadn't figured that whole thing out. And it was because I used the e-collar, and so I have no remorse or guilt. In fact, what I see as a bigger problem is folks who are in the dog training world who will shame people for certain methodologies that they don't like to use or haven't worked in their context without appreciating the context the other person's going through. I think the whole gosh darn dog training industry could use some extra empathy.
Tobys Papers/registration, how is it going? What's the issue?
Oh my gosh, this one is the most frustrating one ever. So Toby Dog still does not have his registration papers. I have been getting like no information from the Maremma Society that does that whole thing, and I don't know, I'm trying to figure out a way to get their attention. I have a conspiracy theory on why I'm facing so much resistance and what the issues I'm facing are, but I really want to try to avoid some drama, so I'm not going to talk about it here.
As much as you love Abby, did you ever regret getting her since she did not become who you had wanted?
No, I have zero regrets. Even though Abby Dog did not turn into the breeding female that I would have hoped for, and even though she's a little bit weird and goofy, like, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing right now, huh? I absolutely love that dog. And, you know, look, you end up where you end up. And I have no plans on changing anything, even if I could. And so I just take it as it comes, and I'm happy to have Abby Dog here on this farm.
Does Allison love or interact with the dogs?
So while I definitely consider myself a dog person, Allison is a cat person. And Allison really loves our cats. In particular, Pablo Barn Cat is her favorite creature on the face of the earth. But she does like the dogs, but she was never really raised with dogs, and sometimes dog energy clashes with her. But I will say, Allison oftentimes will take Abby on a leash, and the two of them will walk around our neighborhood, and she really enjoys going on those walks with Abby, and I think Abby likes doing that with her. Toby Dog, on the other hand, hates leaving the farm, and so you'll never see him do that, but Abby absolutely loves it. She has so much fun with it.
What kind of EDC, everyday carry, items do you have on you all the time in town or even just around the farm?
So there's really only two things that I feel like I always carry with me around the farm when I'm doing stuff. Number one, I have a multi-tool that I'm not going to show you right now because I don't want to do advertising for somebody. I have a multi-tool. I use it all the time for everything. It's great. I actually have two of the exact same one that I carry in my two different winter coat pockets. That way, whenever I need it, it's ready to go. And then the other thing I always carry with me is my phone, because my phone oftentimes doubles as a camera. I capture some of the most interesting stuff happening around the farm by using my phone.
What are some of your favorite guns? Have you had to shoot a predator, especially before you had the dogs?
So yes, I have firearms. I believe that they're an important tool on the farm. And I have different types. For example, just like my chainsaw and my circular saw, even though they're both saws, they do two different things. And so I have multiple types of saws. I have multiple types of guns for various tasks around the farm. You know, whether I'm going out back and hunting for deer, or I have to dispatch a raccoon that's been living in our barn, yes, I've had to use them and do it that way. But I also don't like to try to glamorize or glorify it, because I think that they're necessary tools. And I really struggle with the way a lot of Americans fetishize guns.
I get the impression that Gold Shaw Farm is on good terms with all the neighbors, or do we just hear about the nice ones like my friend Alfred?
When it comes to our neighbors, I would say most of our neighbor relationships are really, really good. Both our directly abutting neighbors who have a property boundary that they share with us, as well as the folks in the community. Yes, there are a couple of folks who really don't like us, because both sort of the flatlander approach that I've brought to things, as well as maybe some of my more vocal stances on things like hound hunting. But overall, it's really good relationships with neighbors. And honestly, we're blessed with some absolutely extraordinary, wonderful people as neighbors. And I feel very lucky to be here in this spot specifically, and in Peacham and kind of the Northeast Kingdom as a whole.
We know that ducks and goose make a lot of noise. Has anyone in your neighborhood ever complained about it?
So part of why I say my neighbors are so great is because, you know, they are pretty tolerant of the noise that we create with our farm and how they respond to it. But then I think I am also lucky with the way the farm's laid out, and that like our house is close to the road, but the farm part is further back and there's woods that surrounds a lot of stuff. And so even though I have guard dogs barking or geese honking or ducks quacking, it doesn't really create a ton of noise for our neighbors. And I'm also really lucky that our closest neighbors are totally cool with it and get the idea that, hey, we live in a farming community, and that's just kind of what an active working farm sounds like. I will say I feel like I was putting that theory to the test though when we were weaning the calves, or at least first weaning them, and the moms and the calves were both bellowing constantly. That was definitely worse. But that was really only for the first week. Ever since then, it's gotten so much better. So things are all good there. And yeah, I'm super lucky with my neighbors.
Have you been to P&H Truck Stop for breakfast yet?
I mean, it's a pretty good diner. I don't see it as like the best place to get breakfast in the area by far. If you really wanted the best brunch spot in this area, I would say actually Three Ponds in the center of Danville is much, much better. Or you can always go to the Peacham Cafe, which is like my go-to spot for a cup of coffee in the morning. I love that. Chuck and Mercy are awesome people. It's a great spot. It's a great little community gathering area. It's awesome. But P&H does make some wonderful cakes and cookies. That would be probably the thing that I eat there too frequently, but they're really good.
Do you find it awkward talking at a camera in an otherwise empty area? Do you ever wonder if your neighbors are judging you?
I find no awkwardness whatsoever when I talk to you guys on camera in this situation here. I am arguably at my most comfortable and relaxed and honest when I'm by myself recording videos, and I will share things and say things that I wouldn't be comfortable saying to a group of my friends because I'm just alone with me and the camera. Like I'm 100% comfortable. Now, when I've had to record things for a video outside of the farm, that's when I feel very awkward and that's when I feel very uncomfortable. But when I'm here on the farm doing my thing, I don't know, I think it's fine. And yeah, sometimes people might look at me weird as they drive by the farm and see me with the camera rig doing my thing, but I don't know, that's on them, that's not on me.
You are a YouTuber in an area with lots of traditional farmers. How often do you get that awkward look when you say you make videos for YouTube, and how old you handle it? Or do you just not tell people?
When I first came out here, people looked at me like I was insane. Whether it was the way that we did the mass planting of trees in the permaculture orchard, or the way I first started by raising ducks, or the way I just make videos for social media, people at first just had no clue what to make of it. And yeah, traditional old school farmers looked at it like, oh God, this guy's gonna be gone in a year or so. I think the fact that we've been here now for about 5 years and things have kept on going, and we seem to continue to be building and growing and making progress, maybe has changed their opinion slightly, but I do know that we leave a lot of folks scratching their heads.
You've said in the past you have ADHD. How do you seem to stay so focused? Do you use medication or behavioral strategies, therapist/coach, or all of the above?
Yeah, I have struggled most of my life with ADHD. It's something that I work hard on trying to find ways to deal with it. Sometimes I try medication, sometimes I try non-medication. I actually recently went back on medication as a way to try to attempt to deal with some issues there, but it's not easy. I don't feel like I have any good advice or any solutions. I find that probably the best thing that I do for myself is try to be very structured and have rituals and routines that force me on a track, and then also creating kind of some unstructured times and blocks of time where I can kind of just go wherever my whimsy takes me. And I try to balance the amount of time that I have of structured activity with like just doing where my passion is. And I don't know, that's the best way I can do it, but that's probably a garbage answer for whoever asked that, and I wish I had some better advice.
How do you find things? You seem to have hoarded piles of disorganization everywhere.
Well, clearly the person who asked that question didn't understand the first question. Yes, I am easily distracted. I have a million projects going at once. The chaos of our barn is very much my own doing. Personally, I know where a lot of things are, but even sometimes I lose things. You guys remember that video where I lost my tractor bucket? But yes, it's a constant battle. I just ask for grace and empathy as I fight it, and you guys witness and ride along and see it. And I do do sometimes see the comments of people saying, hey, you look like a hoarder, or you're a disorganized mess, or why can't you be like other farms? And it hurts my feelings a little bit, I'll admit it. I'm trying my best here. I'm trying to do my best. Yeah, sometimes the result isn't great. But I kind of feel like you got to look at what we're doing as a whole and recognize that, yes, not everything seems great or wonderful, but overall, I think we're making good success with the farm. And to answer a follow-up question some folks might have, I drive Allison crazy with my mess and chaos. It's maybe the biggest area of conflict within our marriage. And I don't even know why I added a modifier of maybe. It's definitely the biggest area of conflict.
Do you ever just want to throw in the towel and give up? If yes, what do you do to get out of the rut? If no, how do you sustain your mental health, the farm, social, etc.?
Yeah, sometimes I get down and depressed. Sometimes I get bummed out about how things are going with a project, or like I said in the previous question there, how messy and disorganized I am, or I get bummed out by criticism or feedback. I definitely have times where I feel that way. It happens. It's inevitable, I feel like. I think the way I pull myself out is also by looking at and counting my blessings and how lucky I am. Like, I feel insanely lucky that I'm able to work on the farm the way I am. I'm able to even be here on the farm to begin with. The fact that I can make an hour-long video of me rambling and answering questions and people will actually want to watch it, like, that is insane levels of luck, and the amount of gratitude that I have for the fact that my life is like that easily outweighs those moments of depression. And for me personally, because I don't feel like I have heavy depressive tendencies, it's easy to just kind of think about that, or spend some time with the dogs, or walk around in the pasture, or sit down and edit a video. Like, I can just do those things and they lift me in my spirits and get me back into a good mental frame of mind. And so even for that, I feel like I'm very fortunate and very lucky.
Do you appreciate input or suggestions in comments, or do you prefer to figure it out on your own?
Even though it might not seem like it at times, I'm actually very appreciative when folks bring up ideas, thoughts, or suggestions. It doesn't mean I'm gonna necessarily follow those thoughts, ideas, or suggestions. Sometimes I might even think that they're just really bad ideas, but I feel very lucky to have a farm that I can put out there and get thoughts, reaction, and feedback. And I can think of several things, whether it was raising ducklings, or working with the cattle, or infrastructure for the cattle, or training the dogs, where I received advice from people and that made me better. And so, yeah, please, if you're watching these videos, never hesitate to throw something in the comment. If you comment on a video in the first 48 to 72 hours, I can almost guarantee you I'm gonna read it. And I genuinely believe that one of the things that makes this farm so different than many other farms is the fact that I see you guys, the viewers of our YouTube channel, as stakeholders in what we're doing here. You're never gonna be the ones to make the ultimate decisions, but I do take your advice and input into consideration. And yes, I'm wildly appreciative of comments from the crowd.
OMG. Why would you ever open yourself up to these questions? Some of them are incredibly rude. You must have thick skin.
I don't know. I like these honest conversations. Who knows? I might do another video. And I also know, by the way, that there were a lot of questions that folks asked that I did not answer. And so if you're curious, it's because I answered them in the previous Uncomfortable Questions video. And so if you want to see the answers to those questions, you probably should click on that video right up there. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching, everybody.